The key slid into the lock of her own front door. Sarah Mitchell hadn't told anyone she was coming home early from her business trip. After 2 months curating art collections across Europe, she wanted to surprise her husband David. But as she pushed open the door, the real surprise was waiting for her inside. A blonde woman, heavily pregnant, cooking dinner in her kitchen, wearing her apron. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from. After 2 exhausting months in Europe, Sarah had managed to wrap up her exhibition tour 3 weeks early. The 16-hour flight from Milan to Chicago had left her drained, but the thought of seeing her husband David's face when she walked through the door kept her going through the jet lag. Their marriage had weathered its share of challenges over the past 8 years. David, an investment manager at Continental Trust Bank, had always supported Sarah's career, even when it took her away for weeks at a time. They'd built what Sarah believed was a solid partnership, childless by mutual choice, focused on their careers, with a beautiful home in the suburbs of Chicago that they'd spent years perfecting. As Sarah's taxi pulled into the tree-lined street of her neighborhood, she felt that familiar sense of relief. Home, finally. But as the car approached her house, something felt off. "That's strange," Sarah murmured, noticing a sleek black BMW she didn't recognize parked in her usual spot in the driveway. Maybe David bought a new car, she wondered, but immediately dismissed the thought. David would have mentioned such a major purchase in their daily calls. As the taxi driver helped her with her luggage, Sarah noted more discrepancies. The front garden had been completely redesigned. The carefully selected hypoallergenic plants she'd insisted on due to her severe allergies had been replaced with vibrant hydrangeas. Beautiful, but exactly the flowers her immunologist had warned her to avoid. The exterior lighting had changed too. The warm golden sconces that had taken them months to source from an artisan in Vermont had been replaced with harsh, modern blue LED fixtures that gave the colonial-style home an oddly clinical appearance. Maybe he's planning a surprise renovation, Sarah thought, though the knot in her stomach suggested otherwise. Sarah paid the driver and wheeled her suitcase to the front door. That's when she heard it, unfamiliar music drifting through the windows. Not David's preferred jazz or her classical compilations, but pulsing electronic dance music that seemed entirely out of character for their household. Using her key, Sarah entered quietly. The entryway hit her with another shock. The carefully curated gallery wall featuring photographs from their travels had been replaced with large abstract prints in aggressive neon colors, precisely the style of art she had professionally critiqued as soulless commercial work in her last published review. "David?" she called out, hearing her voice crack slightly. No answer came over the pulsing music. Sarah moved deeper into the house, wheeling her suitcase behind her. Each room she passed showed evidence of transformation. Their neutral-toned living room now featured a vibrant purple sectional sofa replacing their beloved vintage leather couch. The bookshelves had been cleared of David's history books and her art volumes, now displaying decorative objects and few actual books. As Sarah approached the kitchen, the smell of unfamiliar spices grew stronger. She pushed open the swinging door and froze. Standing at her professional-grade range, a housewarming gift from her parents, was a woman Sarah had never seen before. Tall and slender except for a prominent baby bump, the woman had platinum blonde hair pulled into a messy but stylish bun. She wore Sarah's vintage Parisian apron, the one Sarah's grandmother had given her, stretched awkwardly over her pregnant belly. For what seemed like an eternity, Sarah stood silent, trying to process the scene. The woman hadn't noticed her yet, humming along to the music as she stirred something in Sarah's copper cookware. Then, as if sensing a presence, the woman turned. Sarah expected shock, embarrassment, perhaps panic at being discovered. Instead, the blonde woman's perfectly made-up face registered only mild surprise before settling into a practiced smile. "You must be Sarah," the woman said calmly, placing the wooden spoon on the spoon rest. "David said you wouldn't be back for another 3 weeks." Sarah felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. The casual tone, the knowledge of her schedule, the comfortable way this stranger occupied her space, it all suggested something far beyond a brief indiscretion. "Who are you?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice barely audible over the music still pulsing through the house's speaker system. "And what are you doing in my home?" The woman reached for the tablet on the counter and turned down the music with a manicured finger. The sudden relative quiet felt even more unsettling. "I'm Eliza," the woman replied, resting one hand on her baby bump in what seemed like a deliberately protective gesture. "Eliza Carlyle. David didn't mention I'd be here, did he?" A small, knowing smile played across her lips. "That's so typical of him. Always putting things off until the last minute." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. A relative needing somewhere to stay? No. David was an only child whose parents had retired to Florida years ago. A friend in trouble? But why would she speak with such familiarity? "I don't understand," Sarah said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Where is David? Why are you in our house? What's happening here?" Eliza tilted her head slightly, her expression shifting to one of practiced sympathy that never reached her eyes. "Oh dear," she said. "This is going to be more awkward than I thought." Eliza turned back to the stove, stirring whatever was in the pot with an air of complete ownership that made Sarah's blood boil. The woman was acting as if Sarah was the intruder in her own home. "David will be home in about an hour," Eliza continued, her tone conversational as if discussing the weather. "He's at our parenting class. Tuesday nights, you know." Sarah's legs felt weak. She pulled out one of the kitchen chairs, new, like so much else in the house, and sat down heavily, still in her travel clothes. "I think you need to explain exactly what's going on," Sarah demanded, finding strength in her rising anger. "Now," Eliza sighed, turning down the heat on the stove before facing Sarah. Her hand returned to her baby bump, in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as a calculated gesture. "This is awkward timing," Eliza said, leaning against the counter. "David and I were planning to call you next week. He's been meaning to tell you for months, but with the baby coming in just 8 weeks, we couldn't wait any longer." She glanced around the kitchen with a proprietary air. "I'm afraid you've interrupted our nesting phase." The casual cruelty of the statement hit Sarah like a physical blow. Nesting phase. As if this woman and David were a pair of birds building a home together in the house Sarah had helped design and pay for. "How long?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long what? How long have David and I been together? Or how long have I been living here?" Eliza asked with practiced innocence. "We've been seeing each other for almost 18 months. I moved in," she paused as if counting, "about 6 weeks ago, right after you left for Europe. 18 months. 6 weeks. The numbers pounded in Sarah's head. She and David had celebrated their 8th anniversary just 4 months ago, with a weekend trip to Napa Valley. Had he already been involved with this woman then? Had he been living a double life all this time? "I don't believe you," Sarah said, though part of her already did. The changes to the house, the comfortable way Eliza navigated the space, it all suggested her story was true. Eliza shrugged, returning to her cooking. "Believe what you want. David will confirm everything when he gets home." She opened Sarah's spice cabinet, now reorganized with labels facing outward in precise alphabetical order, and selected a jar. "He's been unhappy for years, Sarah. All these business trips you take, while I've been here giving him what he really wants, a family. We're expecting a son." The emphasis on the word son felt deliberately chosen to wound. Sarah and David had discussed children early in their marriage, and mutually decided to focus on their careers. Or at least, that's what Sarah had believed they'd decided. "I want you out of my house," Sarah said, standing up. "Now, before David gets back." Eliza laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on Sarah's already frayed nerves. "That's not how this works," she replied. "This is David's house too, and he wants me here." She stirred the pot again. "Besides, I've been managing things while you've been gone. Bills, maintenance, everything. Ask David if you don't believe me." Sarah's mind raced. She needed to see more of what had happened to her home, to understand the extent of this invasion. "I'm going to freshen up," she said stiffly, needing a moment alone to think. "Sure," Eliza replied, waving a hand dismissively. "Your things have been moved to the guest room. We've been using the master bedroom, of course." The casual statement sent another wave of nausea through Sarah. She left her suitcase in the kitchen and moved through the house, taking inventory of the changes. The home office where she'd written catalog essays and organized exhibitions had been transformed into a nursery. Pale blue walls, an elaborate crib, and a mural of woodland animals had replaced her desk, files, and art books. A framed ultrasound image hung prominently on the wall, with Baby Mitchell written beneath it in flowing script. In the hallway, Sarah noticed something else missing: the photographs. Every framed picture of her and David had vanished. In their place were photos of David with Eliza, the two of them hiking, at a baseball game, at what appeared to be a baby shower with people Sarah didn't recognize. The master bedroom was the final blow. The sanctuary she had created with David was completely transformed. Their platform bed had been replaced with a traditional sleigh bed. The neutral palette Sarah had carefully chosen was now a bold navy and white scheme. Eliza's clothes filled the closet Sarah had left half empty. On David's nightstand sat pregnancy books and a sonogram photo in a frame that read, "Daddy's Little MVP." Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, their bed that was no longer theirs. She pulled out her phone, instinctively wanting to call David and demand answers. But as she scrolled to his contact, she realized with growing dread that his last text was from 3 days ago, containing nothing but bland reassurances about his week and questions about her exhibition. Sarah dialed his number. After 3 rings, an automated voice informed her that the number was no longer in service. Returning to the kitchen in a daze, Sarah held up her phone. David's number isn't working. Eliza looked up from setting the dining table, with new dinnerware Sarah had never seen before. Oh, he changed his number last month, she said casually. Too many work calls during off hours. Here, use mine. She held out her phone, opened to contacts where David was prominently displayed. Sarah didn't take the offered phone. Instead, she noticed Eliza had set the table for 2, not 3. I assume I'm not welcome for dinner, Sarah said, her voice hollow. Well, this is rather unexpected, Eliza replied. We hadn't planned on you being here. David will want to talk to you privately when he gets home, I'm sure. Perhaps you could go out and get something to eat? Give us some space to figure out how to handle this situation. The audacity of being asked to leave her own home to give her husband and his pregnant girlfriend space was almost laughable. Almost. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah said firmly. This is my house. Eliza's pleasant facade cracked slightly, revealing a flash of annoyance before she composed herself again. Actually, it's both of yours, isn't it? Which means David has every right to invite me to live here. She placed a hand on her belly again. For the baby's sake. The doorbell rang, startling them both. That's probably the delivery, Eliza said, moving toward the front door. We ordered a rocking chair for the nursery. As Eliza disappeared into the hallway, Sarah quickly went through the drawers in the kitchen island. Her organized system had been completely rearranged, but in the third drawer, she found what she was looking for, the file of house documents. She quickly rifled through, confirming that at least their mortgage paperwork seemed unchanged. From the entryway, she could hear Eliza signing for a delivery, her voice cheerful and completely at ease. This woman had thoroughly embedded herself in Sarah's life, with apparently no reservations or guilt. Sarah's phone vibrated with an incoming text. It was from Megan, her best friend since college, who also happened to work at Continental Trust Bank alongside David. Hey, you back early? Tried your house phone but no answer. Need to talk to you ASAP about David. Something weird with the Henderson account. Call me. Before Sarah could respond, she heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the kitchen window, she saw David's silver Audi parking beside the black BMW. Her husband was home. Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. After the initial shock and pain, she now wanted answers. She squared her shoulders and waited. The front door opened, and Sarah heard the familiar sound of David's keys dropping into the ceramic bowl in the entryway. A bowl that had been replaced with something new, she noted absently. Babe, that rocker got delivered but they sent the wrong color. I told them we need the... David's voice trailed off as he rounded the corner into the kitchen and saw Sarah standing there. For a brief moment, genuine shock registered on his face. His mouth opened and closed without sound, and color drained from his features. Then, as if a mask had slipped into place, his expression changed to one of practiced concern. Sarah, he said, his voice carefully modulated, you're back early. David Mitchell had always been handsome in a conventional way. Athletic build maintained through regular tennis matches, sandy brown hair cut in an expensive but conservative style, blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled. At 42, he looked younger than his age, especially in the casual polo shirt and khakis he wore now. But as Sarah studied the man she'd been married to for 8 years, she realized she was seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The way his eyes darted between her and Eliza, the slight tension in his jaw, the calculated distance he maintained, standing closer to Eliza than to his wife. Obviously, Sarah replied coolly. I've met Eliza. David nodded slowly, moving to stand beside the pregnant woman. His hand automatically went to the small of Eliza's back in an intimate gesture that told Sarah everything about their relationship. I was going to tell you when you got back, David said, his tone rehearsed. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Find out what exactly? Sarah asked. That you moved your pregnant girlfriend into our home while I was away? That you've redecorated the entire house? That you've changed your phone number? Which part were you planning to tell me, David? David exchanged a look with Eliza before answering. All of it. Sarah, I know this is a shock, but Eliza and I, it just happened. We're in love. The cliché was almost worse than the betrayal. It just happened. As if an 18-month affair resulting in pregnancy was some sort of natural disaster that couldn't have been prevented. When did you plan to tell me? Sarah pressed. Eliza says you've been seeing each other for a year and a half. That's half of the time I was working on the European exhibition, which, by the way, you encouraged me to take on. A flash of something, guilt, annoyance, crossed David's face. I was trying to find the right time. The right time, Sarah repeated flatly. And that would have been when exactly? After the baby was born? On your first anniversary? David's jaw tightened. This isn't productive, Sarah. What's done is done. We need to talk about next steps. Next steps, Sarah echoed, feeling like a parrot repeating phrases that made no sense. Yes, David said, moving to the dining room table where his briefcase sat. He opened it and removed a folder. I've had papers drawn up, a divorce settlement that's fair to everyone involved. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. You've already prepared divorce papers? It's better this way, David insisted, laying the documents on the table. Clean break. You get to keep focusing on your career, and Eliza and I can focus on our family. The casual cruelty of his words hit Sarah anew. 8 years of marriage, dismissed so easily. I need you to sign these tonight, David continued, his tone becoming more businesslike. My attorney advised that we resolve this quickly, for everyone's benefit. Tonight? Sarah asked incredulously. You expect me to sign divorce papers without even reading them? Without my own attorney? David's expression hardened slightly. It's a generous settlement, Sarah. You get to keep your art collection, your personal investments. I'm not trying to take advantage of you. Sarah approached the table and glanced at the papers without touching them. Even from a cursory look, she could see it was far more than just divorce papers. There were documents related to their joint accounts, the house, and something about the Henderson Family Trust. Why are there documents about my family's foundation in here? Sarah asked, suspicion growing. Just formalizing the separation of our financial interests, David said smoothly. You know I've been helping manage some of the Henderson investments. This just clarifies that I'll no longer have any involvement. Something didn't add up. David had indeed helped with some investment advice for her family's foundation, but he'd never had signing authority or direct access to those accounts. Sarah's phone vibrated again. Another text from Megan. Don't sign anything. Something's wrong with the Henderson account. Call me ASAP. Sarah glanced up to see both David and Eliza watching her intently. I need time to review these, Sarah said, buying time, and I need to speak with my own attorney. There's no time for that, David insisted, his voice taking on an edge she'd rarely heard. I need you to sign these papers and move out as soon as possible, for the baby's sake. There was that phrase again, for the baby's sake, as if an unborn child somehow entitled them to her home and rushed legal proceedings. Move out, Sarah repeated. This is my house too, David. My name is on the mortgage. Where exactly do you expect me to go tonight? You can stay at a hotel for a few days, Eliza interjected, just until you find a more permanent arrangement. We've already packed some of your essential items. She gestured toward a suitcase Sarah hadn't noticed before, sitting by the kitchen door. The rest of your things are in storage. You packed my things? Sarah felt her composure slipping. You put my possessions in storage without my permission? We needed the space, David said unapologetically, for the nursery and Eliza's things. This is insane, Sarah said, shaking her head. You can't just erase me from my own life and expect me to cooperate. Be reasonable, Sarah, David said, his tone patronizing. This situation is difficult for everyone. The sooner we resolve it, the better. As David spoke, Sarah noticed Eliza moving toward the kitchen island where her purse sat. The blonde woman casually removed something that looked like prescription medication, swallowing a pill with water. What's that? Sarah asked, momentarily distracted. Prenatal vitamins, Eliza answered smoothly. Doctor's orders. David placed a pen on top of the papers. Sarah, please, just sign the documents. Then you can go, and we can all start moving forward. I'm not signing anything tonight, Sarah said firmly, and I'm not leaving my house. David's expression darkened. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. Am I? Sarah countered. You've been having an affair for over a year, moved another woman into our home, changed the locks on my office, disposed of my belongings, and prepared legal documents I've never seen before. But I'm the one making things difficult. You were never here, David snapped, his composure finally cracking. Always at some gallery or exhibition or auction. What did you expect? I expected fidelity, Sarah replied coldly. It's generally considered a basic component of marriage. David laughed bitterly. Marriage requires presence, Sarah. You chose your career over our relationship years ago. That's not fair, Sarah protested. We agreed on our priorities together. You encouraged my career. Things change, David said, glancing at Eliza. People change. I want a family, Sarah. Something you were never interested in. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. Megan again. Sarah knew she needed to take this call. I need to use the bathroom, she said abruptly. The powder room is being renovated, Eliza said quickly. Use the guest bath upstairs. Sarah nodded and headed for the stairs, feeling David's and Eliza's eyes on her back. Once inside the guest bathroom, also redecorated in a style she didn't recognize, Sarah locked the door and answered the call. Megan, what's going on? she whispered. Sarah, thank God. Megan's voice came through, tense with worry. Where are you? Are you at home? Yes, and you won't believe what I found, Sarah began. Listen to me, Megan cut her off. Don't sign anything David gives you. Don't agree to anything. There's something seriously wrong. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her suspicion crystallizing into dread. David's been making unauthorized transactions from the Henderson Foundation accounts, Megan explained rapidly. He somehow got access to the signature cards. He's been systematically moving money offshore for months. Sarah felt the room spin around her. How much? At least $3.2 million that we can trace so far, Megan said grimly. And Sarah, that's not all. That woman he's with, she's not who she claims to be. Sarah sat down on the edge of the bathtub, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. What do you mean she's not who she claims to be? Sarah whispered, keeping her voice low despite the running water she'd turned on for privacy. Her name isn't Eliza Carlisle, Megan explained urgently. It's Elizabeth Kaplan. She's a known financial fraudster who's been investigated for similar schemes in Boston, Miami, and Seattle. She targets wealthy individuals, especially those with access to family money or investment accounts. Sarah's mind raced, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. David's insistence on her taking the European assignment, the sudden pregnancy announcement, the urgency to sign papers tonight. The pregnancy, Sarah breathed. Is it even real? Based on her previous MO, probably not, Megan replied. In Seattle, she wore a prosthetic pregnancy belly to gain sympathy from her Mark's family, created a whole story about carrying twins. Sarah recalled the protective way Eliza kept touching her belly, how she'd conveniently taken prenatal vitamins right in front of her. How do you know all this? Sarah asked. After I noticed the suspicious transfers from the Henderson accounts, I flagged it for compliance, Megan explained. They've been building a case for weeks. I wasn't supposed to tell you. They're worried about tipping them off. But when you texted that you were home early, I knew you were walking into something dangerous. Dangerous? Sarah felt a chill. Do you think they would hurt me? I don't know, Megan admitted. But in the Seattle case, when the victim refused to cooperate, valuable artwork and jewelry mysteriously disappeared from their home. In Miami, the victim's identity was stolen after signing what they thought were innocent documents. They're trying to get me to sign papers tonight, Sarah said, the full scope of the situation becoming clear. Not just divorce papers, documents about the Henderson Foundation. Don't sign anything, Megan emphasized. The FBI has been notified. They're already involved. The FBI? Sarah repeated, stunned. Yes, the Foundation's accounts cross state lines, so it's federal jurisdiction, Megan explained. Sarah, I need you to stay calm and stall them. Can you do that? Just find excuses not to sign or leave until help arrives. How long? Sarah asked, checking her watch. It was just past 7 p.m. I don't know exactly, but soon, Megan promised. They were already monitoring the situation. Knowing you're there will accelerate their timeline. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. Okay, I'll stall. Be careful, Megan warned. David's been moving money for months. They're not amateurs, Sarah. After ending the call, Sarah stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, travel-worn, shocked, betrayed. But underneath the hurt, Sarah felt something else emerging. Determination. This wasn't just about David's infidelity anymore. This was fraud, theft, and they were trying to use her to access her family's charitable foundation, money dedicated to arts education for underprivileged children. Sarah splashed cold water on her face, ran her fingers through her hair, and steeled herself for what was to come. She had to keep them talking, keep them believing she might eventually cooperate, until help arrived. Downstairs, she found David and Eliza in what appeared to be a hushed, tense conversation that stopped abruptly when she entered the room. Everything okay? David asked, his voice overly casual. As well as can be expected, Sarah replied, moving toward the dining table where the papers still lay. I've been thinking about what you said. David and Eliza exchanged a quick glance that Sarah now recognized as calculating rather than intimate. And, David prompted. I need to understand what I'm signing, Sarah said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. Walk me through these documents. Relief flashed across David's face. Of course, that's reasonable. He sat down across from her, pulling the stack of papers closer. As I mentioned, it's a straightforward divorce settlement. Sarah nodded, watching as he flipped to the first page. For the next 20 minutes, David explained the documents, or rather, the version of the documents he wanted her to believe existed. He spoke of equitable distribution of assets, her retention of personal property, his assumption of the mortgage. What he didn't explain, and what Sarah could clearly see, were clauses transferring signing authority on accounts, powers of attorney for financial decisions, and authorizations related to the Henderson Foundation's investment portfolio. And this section? Sarah asked, pointing to a paragraph buried in the middle of page 17, about the transfer of management responsibilities for existing philanthropic endeavors. David barely glanced at it. Just formalizing that I'll no longer be advising on the Henderson Foundation investments. You'll retain full control. A lie. The clause actually authorized David to act as an agent on behalf of the foundation for a period of 3 years. I see, Sarah said, turning to the next page. And what about our art collection? I don't see it mentioned specifically. It's covered under personal property, David assured her. You keep your pieces, I keep mine. Fair division. Another lie. A separate document in the stack, which he hadn't shown her yet, included an inventory of art assets and their transfer to a newly formed LLC, one that Sarah suspected she would have no actual control over. As Sarah continued to ask questions, drawing out the process, she noticed Eliza growing increasingly anxious. The blonde woman checked her watch repeatedly and kept glancing at her phone. Is there somewhere you need to be? Sarah asked innocently. No, Eliza said quickly. Just checking the time. It's getting late. David shot Eliza a warning look before turning back to Sarah with a forced smile. We have plenty of time to go through this properly. I want you to feel comfortable with everything. Sarah nodded, pretending to read another page carefully. This mentions an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We don't have any offshore accounts, David. A flash of annoyance crossed his face. That's just standard legal language. It's covering all bases for assets disclosure. Standard legal language. For accounts he'd already established to funnel money from her family's foundation. I see, Sarah murmured, turning another page with deliberate slowness. And these investment accounts listed here? I don't recognize some of these numbers. Those are the Henderson Foundation accounts, David explained smoothly. They're included for reference only, to show they remain separate from our personal assets. Included for reference, with signature lines authorizing their control. Sarah checked her watch. Almost an hour had passed since she'd spoken to Megan. How much longer would she need to stall? I think I need something to drink before we continue, Sarah said, standing up. This is a lot to process. I'll get you some water, Eliza offered quickly, starting to rise. Actually, I'd prefer wine, Sarah replied. There should still be some Barolo in the cellar, unless you've replaced that too? David and Eliza exchanged another look. I'm afraid we don't keep alcohol in the house anymore, David said. Because of the baby, of course. The non-existent baby that was their entire pretext. Water is fine then, Sarah conceded, watching as Eliza moved to the refrigerator. As Eliza reached up to retrieve a glass from a cabinet, Sarah noticed something odd. The woman's pregnant belly shifted slightly to the side, in a way that no real pregnancy would allow. It was subtle, but unmistakable to Sarah's now suspicious eyes. Megan had been right. The pregnancy was fake. Eliza handed Sarah the water, and their eyes met. For a moment, Sarah thought she detected a flicker of concern in the other woman's gaze, as if sensing Sarah's growing awareness. Thank you, Sarah said, taking a deliberate sip. So, David, you mentioned I would need to move out tonight. Where exactly are my things? You said storage, but which facility? Safekeep on Riverside Drive, David answered. Everything's in a climate-controlled unit. I have the access information in my office. Sarah nodded, wondering if her belongings were actually there, or if that was yet another lie. And my family photos? The albums from my parents? My grandmother's jewelry? She asked, knowing these items would be particularly valuable and easy to sell. All safely stored, David assured her, though his eyes didn't quite meet hers. We were very careful with your personal items. Sarah set down her water glass with a deliberate click. You know what I find interesting, David? You keep saying we. We packed your things. We needed the space. We were careful, as if Eliza has equal say in what happens to my possessions in my home. David's jaw tightened. Eliza is going to be my wife, Sarah. She's carrying my child. Of course I include her in decisions. Your wife, Sarah repeated. You haven't even filed for divorce yet, but she's already your wife. In all the ways that matter, David replied coldly. Sarah turned to Eliza, who had been watching their exchange with calculated attentiveness. How far along did you say you were, Eliza? 8 months? 32 weeks, Eliza confirmed, one hand automatically moving to her belly. That's interesting, Sarah said casually. Because 8 months ago, David and I were in Napa Valley celebrating our anniversary. He didn't mention he had a pregnant girlfriend then. Eliza's expression didn't waver. I wasn't pregnant then. We've only known about the baby for 5 months. I see, Sarah nodded, as if accepting this explanation. So you got pregnant after knowing each other for what? A year? That's fast. When you know, Eliza replied with practiced serenity. Enough about the timeline. David interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with this line of questioning. Let's get back to the documents. If we can finish tonight, you can take the signed copies with you. Take them where exactly? Sarah asked. You still haven't told me where I'm supposed to go at. She checked her watch. Nearly 9 o'clock at night. The Four Seasons has availability, David said. I checked this afternoon. They can accommodate you for as long as needed. How thoughtful, Sarah said dryly. You checked hotel availability before I even knew I needed a hotel. David's patience was visibly wearing thin. Sarah, please, just sign the papers. You can have your attorney review everything afterward if you're concerned, but I need these signatures tonight. Why the rush? Sarah pressed. If this is all above board and fair, as you claim, why does it have to happen right now? David glanced at Eliza before answering. My attorney advised completing this as quickly as possible, for clean closure. Your attorney advised getting signatures without independent legal review? Sarah asked skeptically. That seems unlikely for any reputable lawyer. David's expression hardened. You're being difficult on purpose. No, I'm being cautious, Sarah corrected, which seems reasonable when my husband of 8 years ambushes me with divorce papers and a pregnant girlfriend in one evening. Eliza stepped forward, her voice taking on a harder edge than before. David, this isn't working. She's not going to sign tonight. She will, David insisted, turning back to Sarah. Look, I've been more than patient. I've explained everything. I've offered a generous settlement. I've arranged accommodation for you. What more do you want? Time, Sarah said simply. Time to process, time to review, time to consult my own attorney. We don't have time, David snapped, mask slipping further. These need to be executed tonight. Why? Sarah challenged. What happens at midnight? Do you turn into pumpkins? Eliza's hand closed around David's arm in warning. David, enough. We can revisit tomorrow. But David shook her off, leaning across the table toward Sarah. Sign the papers, Sarah, now, or things will become much less pleasant. Sarah felt a chill at his tone but maintained her composure. Are you threatening me, David? I'm stating facts, he replied coldly. You can make this easy or difficult. Your choice. As tension filled the room, Sarah noticed Eliza checking her phone again, typing something quickly before putting it away. The woman's nervousness was becoming more apparent by the minute. Just then, Sarah's own phone vibrated with an incoming text. Glancing down, she saw Megan's name and a simple message. ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes. She just needed to stall a little longer. Let me think about this, Sarah said, picking up the stack of papers and leafing through them, as if reconsidering. If I sign tonight, what exactly happens next? David seemed to relax slightly, believing she was finally cooperating. You'll take these copies with you to the Four Seasons. Tomorrow the transfers will be processed through our respective attorneys. By the end of the week, everything will be officially separated. And the house? Sarah asked. When would I need to formally move out? Technically, you'd have 30 days, David replied. But given the circumstances, sooner would be better, for everyone. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. And my personal items at this storage facility, I'd have immediate access? Of course, David assured her. I'll text you the unit number and access code tomorrow. Not tonight. Tomorrow. Another red flag. What about my car? Sarah continued. It's still in long-term parking at O'Hare. I can have someone pick it up for you, David offered, growing more eager as he sensed her wavering. Just give me the parking details. That's very thoughtful, Sarah said, forcing a small smile. And the Henderson Foundation? How would management transition work there? David hesitated almost imperceptibly. There's no transition needed. As I said, those accounts remain entirely under your control. Another lie. The documents clearly indicated otherwise. I see, Sarah murmured, turning another page. Eliza, meanwhile, had moved to the kitchen window, peering out at the street with poorly concealed anxiety. She checked her watch again before catching Sarah watching her. Just wondering if the rain is going to hold off, Eliza explained unconvincingly. The forecast mentioned storms tonight. The sky had been clear when Sarah arrived, and she'd heard nothing about rain, but she nodded as if accepting this explanation. David, Sarah said, returning her attention to her husband, if I were to sign these tonight, I'd want to make one small change. This clause about the Henderson Foundation investments, I'd prefer to remove it entirely since you say it's not relevant anyway. David's expression tightened. The documents are a package, Sarah. My attorney prepared them to be comprehensive. Removing sections could invalidate the whole agreement. I don't see how removing an irrelevant clause would invalidate anything, Sarah pressed, if it's just standard language as you claimed. Let's not complicate things, David insisted. The papers are ready as they stand. Sarah set down the documents and leaned back in her chair. I think I need more time to consider all this. It's a lot to process in one evening. David's mask of patience finally slipped completely. Damn it, Sarah. Just sign the fucking papers." The outburst hung in the air between them. Eliza hurried back from the window, placing a warning hand on David's shoulder. "David," she murmured, "calm down." But David shrugged her off, standing abruptly. "We don't have time for this. I've been patient. I've explained everything. I've been more than generous." "Generous?" Sarah repeated incredulously. "You've been stealing from my family's foundation, David. That's not generosity. It's crime." The statement landed like a bomb in the room. David froze, and Eliza's carefully maintained composure cracked completely. "What did you say?" David asked, his voice deadly quiet. "You heard me," Sarah replied, standing to face him. "I know about the unauthorized transfers. I know about the offshore accounts. Did you really think no one would notice $3.2 million disappearing?" David and Eliza exchanged panicked looks. "You don't know what you're talking about," David tried, but his voice lacked conviction. "Don't I?" Sarah challenged. "Continental Trust has flagged the transactions, David. It's already been reported." "She's bluffing," Eliza said quickly. "She just got back. She can't know anything." Sarah turned to the blonde woman. "I know enough, Elizabeth. Or do you prefer Eliza these days?" The color drained from Eliza's face. "What did you call me?" "Elizabeth Kaplan," Sarah said clearly. "That is your real name, isn't it? Not Eliza Carlyle." For a moment, no one moved. Then David recovered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "This is ridiculous, Sarah. You're making wild accusations because you're upset about our relationship." "Am I?" Sarah countered. "Then explain why Continental Trust Compliance has been building a case for weeks. Explain why the FBI is involved." "FBI?" Eliza repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're lying," David insisted, but he'd begun to sweat, his collar suddenly seeming too tight. "Check your phone, David," Sarah suggested. "I'm sure your contact at the bank has been trying to reach you. The transfers were flagged. The investigation is already underway." David's hand moved involuntarily toward his pocket, confirming Sarah's suspicion. "This is absurd," Eliza declared, but her voice trembled slightly. "David, she's manipulating you. Don't listen to her." "How long have you two been planning this?" Sarah asked, looking between them. "Was I always the target, or did you choose me after meeting David?" "Stop talking," David snapped. "The baby is a nice touch," Sarah continued, gesturing to Eliza's belly, "though you might want to secure that prosthetic better. It shifted when you reached for the glass earlier." Eliza's hand flew protectively to her stomach, her eyes wide. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she hissed. "I think I do," Sarah replied calmly. "This isn't your first performance, is it? Seattle, Miami, Boston, you've done this before." Eliza's composed facade crumbled entirely. She turned to David, panic evident in her expression. "We need to leave. Now." David hesitated, looking between the documents on the table and his partner in crime. "The papers," he began. "Forget the papers," Eliza snapped. "She knows. We need to go." David seemed torn, unwilling to abandon the scheme they'd clearly spent months planning. "But the transfers, we need her signatures to access the—" "David!" Eliza cut him off sharply. "She said the FBI is involved. We need to leave." The mention of federal law enforcement finally seemed to penetrate David's hesitation. He grabbed his phone from the table, quickly scrolling through messages, his face growing paler by the second. "How did you know?" he demanded, looking up at Sarah with a mixture of anger and fear. "You just got back. There's no way you could know about the accounts." "You underestimated me," Sarah said simply, "and you underestimated the people who care about me." David's expression hardened. "The documents, Sarah. Sign them, and we'll leave you alone. One signature, and this all goes away." "It's too late for that," Sarah replied. "As I said, the investigation is already underway." "She's lying," Eliza insisted, though less convincingly than before. "The authorities would be here if what she's saying was true." As if on cue, headlights swept across the front windows as a vehicle pulled into the driveway. Eliza rushed to the window, pushing aside the curtain. "It's too early," she whispered, her voice filled with dread. "They weren't supposed to be here until midnight." David joined her at the window, his face draining of the little color it had left. "Who was coming at midnight?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Movers for my remaining belongings? Or maybe someone to help with those offshore accounts?" Neither David nor Eliza answered, transfixed by whatever they were seeing outside. "It's over," Sarah said quietly. "Whatever you were planning, it's done." David turned to her, desperation replacing his earlier confidence. "Sarah, listen to me. You don't understand what's happening. We can work this out. Just sign the papers, and I'll explain everything." "I think you've explained quite enough already," Sarah replied coolly. A firm knock sounded at the front door, making all three of them jump. Eliza backed away from the window, looking for an escape route. "The back door," she whispered urgently to David. "We can still get out." But David seemed frozen in place, reality finally crashing down around him. "They'll have the house surrounded," he said hollowly. Another knock, louder this time, followed by a firm voice. "FBI, open the door." The commanding voice from outside left no room for misinterpretation. "FBI, open the door now." David and Eliza remained frozen, panic evident in their expressions. Sarah moved toward the front door, but David suddenly lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "Don't," he hissed. "We can still fix this." Sarah wrenched her arm free. "It's over, David." Before anyone could react further, the front door burst open. 4 agents and FBI windbreakers swarmed into the foyer, weapons drawn. "FBI, hands where we can see them," shouted the lead agent, a tall woman with short dark hair and intense focus. David raised his hands slowly, his face ashen. Beside him, Eliza did the same, though her eyes darted frantically around the room as if still seeking escape. "Sarah Mitchell?" the female agent asked, quickly scanning the room. "That's me," Sarah confirmed, stepping forward with her hands visible. "Agent Cassandra Kim, FBI Financial Crimes Division," the woman said, holstering her weapon as other agents moved to secure David and Eliza. "Are you all right, Mrs. Mitchell?" "I'm fine," Sarah assured her, though fine seemed like a gross simplification of her emotional state. Agent Kim nodded, then turned her attention to the other 2 people in the room. "David Mitchell and Elizabeth Kaplan, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial crimes, and attempted theft from a charitable foundation." As the agents began to handcuff David, he struggled briefly. "This is a misunderstanding. Sarah, tell them. This is just a divorce matter." Agent Kim ignored his protests, continuing to recite his rights as another agent secured his wrists behind his back. The agent handling Eliza had a more difficult time. As he attempted to cuff her, Eliza's pregnant belly shifted dramatically to one side. "Careful with that," Eliza snapped. "It's expensive." The agent paused, looking down at the prosthetic in confusion. "Ma'am, I need you to remove that device." Eliza glared, but reached under her shirt with her still free hand, unfastening something. The entire pregnancy belly came away in one piece, revealing her slim frame underneath. She dropped the sophisticated prosthetic onto the floor with a dull thud. Sarah stared at the discarded fake belly. Even knowing it wasn't real, seeing the physical evidence of the deception was jarring, a tangible symbol of the elaborate lies that had been constructed around her. Agent Kim approached Sarah, while the other agents continued processing David and Eliza. "Mrs. Mitchell, I know this is a shock. We've been building this case for several weeks based on financial evidence, but we weren't expecting to find you here tonight. According to our information, you weren't due back for another 3 weeks." "I finished my work early," Sarah explained, feeling oddly detached as she watched the scene unfold in her own living room. "I wanted to surprise my husband." A flicker of sympathy crossed Agent Kim's professional demeanor. "Quite a surprise all around, it seems. We need to ask you some questions, but they can wait until tomorrow if you prefer." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I want to understand what's happening. What exactly were they doing?" Agent Kim gestured toward the dining table where the document still lay. "May I?" Sarah nodded, and the agent flipped through the papers with gloved hands. "Based on our investigation, your husband and Miss Kaplan were attempting to gain control of your family's charitable foundation through fraudulent documentation," Agent Kim explained. "These papers contain hidden clauses that would have given them signing authority over the Henderson Foundation accounts. They've already managed to transfer over $3 million to offshore accounts, but they needed your signature to access the bulk of the foundation's assets." Sarah felt sick. "And the divorce? Was that just part of the scheme too?" "The divorce was real enough," Agent Kim confirmed, "but expedited and structured to their advantage. Had you signed these papers, you would have unknowingly surrendered not just your marital assets, but control of your family's foundation." From the foyer, Sarah could hear David still protesting as agents led him toward the door. "Sarah, don't listen to them. This is all a misunderstanding." Elizabeth Kaplan, in contrast, remained coldly silent, her calculating eyes fixed on Sarah with unmistakable hatred. "How did you find them?" Sarah asked Agent Kim. "Megan, my friend, she said you were already investigating. We received a report from compliance officers at Continental Trust Bank about suspicious transfers from the Henderson Foundation accounts," Agent Kim explained. "The pattern matched previous cases involving Miss Kaplan. When we began surveillance, we discovered her connection to your husband." The agent picked up a document from the stack, pointing to a particular clause. "This is especially sophisticated work. The authorization for wire transfers is embedded within standard divorce language about asset division. Most people wouldn't catch it without careful legal review." Sarah thought back to David's insistence that she sign immediately, without consulting her own attorney. The urgency made sickening sense now. Were they working alone? Sarah asked, remembering Eliza's mysterious phone checks and the comment about someone coming at midnight. No, Agent Kim confirmed. We've identified at least 3 accomplices. 2 were apprehended approaching the back of your property, just as we entered. The third, she paused as her radio crackled. After listening briefly, she continued, has just been apprehended 3 blocks away, attempting to flee in a rental van. A van? Sarah repeated. Based on previous cases, they likely plan to empty your home of valuables tonight, Agent Kim explained. Art, jewelry, electronics, anything easily transported and sold. Sarah glanced around her altered home, seeing it with new eyes. The redecorating hadn't just been about Eliza asserting dominance, it had been preparation for stripping the house of anything valuable. Agent Kim continued, Elizabeth Kaplan and her accomplices target wealthy individuals with access to family money or investment accounts. They've stolen over $12 million in the last 3 years, using variations of this exact scenario. And David? Was he a victim too? Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. Agent Kim's expression hardened slightly. Initially, we believed Mr. Mitchell might have been manipulated, unaware of Miss Kaplan's true intentions. However, electronic evidence recovered from his office computer shows he was a willing participant once he understood the potential financial gain. He's been actively assisting with the fraud for at least 6 months. The confirmation of David's willing participation hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just infidelity or midlife crisis, it was calculated criminal behavior. I'd like to speak with your friend Megan Thompson tomorrow as well, Agent Kim added. Her alert to you and to our office likely prevented much greater losses. Sarah nodded numbly. Of course. As the agents led David and Eliza outside to waiting vehicles, additional FBI personnel entered, beginning to document and search the house. One agent carried in a large evidence container. We'll need to process the scene, Agent Kim explained. It may take several hours. Is there somewhere you can stay tonight, Mrs. Mitchell? The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. She was still being asked to leave her own home, just under very different circumstances than David and Eliza had planned. I can call Megan, Sarah said, or a hotel. Agent Kim nodded. Take whatever personal items you need for the night. We'll provide security for the property until our search is complete. As Sarah moved to gather some essentials, she passed by one of the agents carefully placing the prosthetic pregnancy belly into an evidence bag. The agent looked up as she approached. We found 3 more of these upstairs, he informed Agent Kim. Different sizes. Looks like they were documenting a progressive pregnancy. Agent Kim nodded. Add them to the evidence log and check the medicine cabinet. There were likely fake prenatal vitamin bottles as well. Sarah continued to the guest room, where Eliza had said her things had been moved. Opening the door, she found not her belongings, but more evidence of the elaborate scheme. The room contained several suitcases, fake identification documents spread across the bed, and what appeared to be financial records. Agent Kim, Sarah called out, you might want to see this. The agent appeared in the doorway, surveying the room with practiced efficiency. This is exactly what we needed, she said, immediately radioing for the evidence team. Looks like they were preparing to flee the country. Sarah picked up a passport from the bed. It contained her husband's photo, but a different name. Beside it lay plane tickets to the Cayman Islands dated for the following week. They weren't just after the foundation money, were they? Sarah asked quietly. They were going to take everything. That's their usual pattern, Agent Kim confirmed. The foundation was the primary target because of its liquid assets, but they wouldn't have stopped there. Based on what we've seen in previous cases, they likely would have emptied your accounts, maxed out credit cards in your name, and taken anything of value from the property before disappearing. Sarah set down the fake passport, feeling suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was ebbing, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. I think I'll call that hotel now, she said. Agent Kim nodded sympathetically. One of my agents can drive you wherever you need to go. And Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need you to come in tomorrow for a formal statement, but I want you to know, you handled this situation remarkably well. Many people in your position would have panicked. Sarah managed a tired smile. I think I'm saving the panic for later. As she was escorted from the house, past agents cataloging evidence, past the spot where David and Eliza had stood confidently announcing their futures together just hours ago, Sarah felt a strange sense of displacement. The home she had returned to tonight wasn't the one she had left 2 months ago, and the husband she'd believed in for 8 years had never really existed at all. Agent Kim walked her to a waiting FBI vehicle. We'll be in touch first thing tomorrow. Try to get some rest, Mrs. Mitchell. Sarah nodded. Clutching the small overnight bag one of the agents had helped her pack with items that had been deemed safe to remove from the scene. As the car pulled away from the curb, She looked back at her house. Lights blazing from every window, FBI agents moving purposefully in and out, the familiar structure transformed into a crime scene. "Where to, ma'am?" the agent driving asked gently. Sarah considered for a moment. Not the Four Seasons that David had so thoughtfully researched. Not anywhere he had touched or planned. "The Peninsula Hotel, please," she said finally, "on North Michigan Avenue." As they drove away from the neighborhood, Sarah's phone rang. Megan. "Sarah, are you okay? Did they arrive?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed, her voice steadier than she expected. "They arrested David and Elizabeth. I'm headed to a hotel for the night while they process the house." "Oh, thank God," Megan breathed. "I've been so worried. Do you want me to meet you somewhere? You shouldn't be alone tonight." The simple offer of friendship brought the first tears of the evening to Sarah's eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." The Peninsula Hotel suite offered a stark contrast to the chaos Sarah had left behind. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's glittering skyline, the city lights reflecting off Lake Michigan in the distance. The elegant room, with its neutral palette and understated luxury, felt like a sanctuary after the emotional maelstrom of the evening. Sarah sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, still in her travel clothes, as Megan poured them each a glass of wine from the room service delivery. "The FBI agent seemed thorough," Megan said, handing Sarah a glass. "Agent Kim, you said?" Sarah nodded, taking a grateful sip. "Cassandra Kim, Financial Crimes Division. She said they've been building this case for weeks. After I flagged those transfers, things moved quickly," Megan explained, settling into an armchair across from Sarah. "Continental Trust has sophisticated monitoring systems for foundation accounts. David must have known that, but he still tried to move the money." "He always was overconfident," Sarah murmured. She stared into her wine glass, watching the deep red liquid catch the light. "I keep trying to understand when it started. When did my husband become someone capable of this?" Megan's expression softened with sympathy. "I don't think it's that simple, Sarah. Agent Kim explained some of it to me when I first reported the suspicious activity. Elizabeth Kaplan is extremely skilled at what she does. She identifies potential marks, studies them for weaknesses, and exploits those vulnerabilities. But still," Sarah insisted, "to go from being unfaithful to committing federal financial crimes? That's a significant leap." "Maybe," Megan acknowledged. "Or maybe one moral compromise made the next one easier." She hesitated before continuing. "Sarah, there's something else you should know. The investigation revealed that David had been accessing your personal accounts and the foundation systems for nearly 2 years. Long before Elizabeth appeared, Sarah felt a fresh wave of betrayal wash over her. 2 years? That's before I even started planning the European tour." Megan nodded grimly. "The FBI believes he may have been laying groundwork, looking for opportunities, when the foundation received that major endowment last year. The Sutherland donation," Sarah said, remembering the elderly collector who had left $12 million to the Henderson Foundation upon his death. "David organized the investment strategy for those funds." "Exactly," Megan confirmed. "That influx of capital created the opportunity they needed, but they still required your signature for the major transfers." Sarah took another sip of wine, trying to process this latest revelation. "So the European assignment, the one David encouraged me to take, was that part of the plan all along?" "It looks that way," Megan replied gently. "Agent Kim said they found emails between David and Elizabeth discussing the perfect window while you were overseas." The pieces continued falling into place in Sarah's mind. "And let me guess, the timing of my return was supposed to coincide with the completion of their scheme?" Megan nodded. "Based on what the FBI has found so far, they plan to have all the signatures and transfers complete by next week. You weren't supposed to be back until the following week, by which time they would have been gone, along with most of your assets and a significant portion of the foundation's endowment." Sarah set down her wine glass, suddenly feeling ill. "All those calls from Europe, David always sounded so loving, so interested in my work. Was any of it real?" Megan moved to sit beside Sarah on the bed, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I can't answer that, Sarah, but I do know this. What happened isn't a reflection on you. You trusted your husband because that's what people do in marriages. You didn't fail some test of perception." A knock at the door interrupted them. Megan rose to answer it, returning a moment later with Agent Kim. "I apologize for the late intrusion," the FBI agent said, remaining standing despite Sarah's gesture toward a chair. "But we've uncovered some information I thought you should know tonight, rather than waiting until morning." Sarah straightened, bracing herself for more revelations. "What is it?" "The real Eliza Carlisle," Agent Kim began, "is a graduate student in Boston who reported her identity stolen 8 months ago. Elizabeth Kaplan appears to have used her identity to establish credentials here in Chicago, including a fake interior design business. Interior design? Sarah repeated, thinking of the dramatic changes to her home. Agent Kim nodded. It provided a convenient cover for her presence in your house and the subsequent alterations. But that's not why I'm here. She hesitated briefly. Mrs. Mitchell, the evidence team found several hidden cameras installed throughout your home. Sarah felt her skin crawl. Cameras? For what purpose? Based on preliminary forensics, they were installed approximately 7 months ago, Agent Kim explained. The footage was being stored on a secure cloud server we've now accessed. It appears they were monitoring your routines, your conversations, even your private financial discussions. 7 months, Sarah echoed hollowly. While I was still living there, before I left for Europe, Agent Kim nodded grimly. We believe David installed them at Elizabeth's direction as part of their information gathering. The cameras provided them with intimate knowledge of your life, your schedule, even your passwords and financial details you may have discussed at home. The violation felt profound, deeper even than the financial fraud or marital betrayal. The idea that her private moments had been surveilled, analyzed, and exploited by the man she had trusted most was almost too much to bear. There's more, Agent Kim continued. Among the evidence recovered was a detailed plan for what they termed Phase 3. Phase 1 appears to have been information gathering. Phase 2 was isolating you from your assets and obtaining the necessary signatures. Sarah almost didn't want to ask. And Phase 3? Agent Kim's professional demeanor softened slightly. I tell you this not to frighten you further, but so you understand the seriousness of what you've escaped. Phase 3 involved opening lines of credit in your name, maxing out existing accounts, and she paused, choosing her words carefully, ensuring you would be in no position to challenge their actions once discovered. What does that mean exactly? Megan asked when Sarah remained silent. They had prepared documentation suggesting Mrs. Mitchell was suffering from mental health issues, Agent Kim explained. Fabricated medical records, emails to a non-existent therapist, allegedly from Mrs. Mitchell, expressing paranoid thoughts. They were building a case to question her competency if she later challenged the transfers. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm room. They hadn't just planned to steal her money. They had prepared to destroy her credibility, her reputation, perhaps even her freedom. I know this is overwhelming, Agent Kim acknowledged, but I wanted you to have this information tonight because it underscores how comprehensive their planning was. This wasn't a crime of opportunity or a relationship gone wrong. It was a meticulously orchestrated fraud scheme. And David? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Was he fully aware of all this? Agent Kim's expression confirmed the worst before she even spoke. The evidence indicates he was an enthusiastic participant, Mrs. Mitchell. In fact, some of the more aggressive elements of the plan appear to have originated with him, not Miss Kaplan. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Sarah had been holding on to a faint hope that perhaps David had been manipulated, coerced in some way. The confirmation of his willing, even eager participation extinguished that last flicker of hope. What happens now? Sarah asked after a moment of heavy silence. They'll remain in custody pending arraignment, Agent Kim explained. Given the evidence we've already secured and the pattern of previous crimes for Miss Kaplan, I anticipate substantial charges and significant bail if granted at all. The U.S. Attorney's Office is already preparing the case. Will I need to testify? Sarah asked. Eventually, yes, Agent Kim confirmed. But we have substantial documentary evidence. Your testimony will strengthen the case, but it's not the entirety of it. After Agent Kim departed with promises of further updates in the morning, Sarah and Megan sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of these latest revelations settling between them. I don't even know who he was, Sarah finally said, her voice breaking. 8 years of marriage, and I never really knew him at all. Megan moved closer, wrapping an arm around Sarah's shoulders. Maybe no one did, Sarah. Maybe the person you thought you married never existed. Sarah leaned into her friend's embrace, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back all evening. How do you start over when your entire life turns out to be built on lies? One day at a time, Megan answered simply, and you don't do it alone. As Sarah cried in her friend's arms, the Chicago skyline continued to glitter beyond the windows, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within the hotel room. Her life had been shattered tonight, but as the initial shock began to recede, Sarah felt something unexpected stirring beneath the pain and betrayal, a quiet, steely determination. David and Elizabeth had underestimated her. They had mistaken her trust for weakness, her dedication to her career for neglect of her marriage. They had calculated and schemed and lied, believing her too distracted or naive to notice. But they had been wrong. 6 months later, The Anderson Gallery in downtown Chicago hummed with conversation and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses. Spotlights illuminated a series of powerful mixed-media pieces arranged throughout the modern space, each depicting fragmented houses, broken contracts, and shadowy figures in the background of seemingly perfect domestic scenes. At the center of the exhibition stood Sarah Mitchell, greeting guests and discussing her curatorial vision. Gone was the shell-shocked woman from that April night. In her place stood someone stronger, more focused, with a quiet confidence that radiated from within. The exhibition challenges our assumptions about security and trust, Sarah explained to an art critic from the Tribune. Each artist explores deception from a different angle: financial fraud, identity theft, intimate betrayal, while examining how we rebuild in the aftermath. And the title? The critic asked, gesturing to the stark lettering on the gallery wall, Hidden in Plain Sight, The Art of Deception and Recovery. It speaks to the dual nature of the exhibition, Sarah replied, both the deception that often occurs right before our eyes and the recovery that must happen visibly, intentionally, to be complete. As the critic moved on to study a particularly powerful installation, Megan appeared at Sarah's side, offering a fresh glass of sparkling water. Full house, Megan observed. The reviews are already coming in online. They're calling it revolutionary and cathartic. Sarah smiled. It's not just my vision. Each of these artists has experienced some form of betrayal or fraud. That authenticity resonates with people. Speaking of which, Megan said, lowering her voice, Agent Kim just arrived. She said she has news. Sarah nodded, scanning the crowd until she spotted the FBI agent near the entrance, looking somewhat out of place in the artistic gathering despite her elegant pantsuit. Sarah excused herself and made her way through the crowd. Agent Kim, she greeted warmly. I'm glad you could make it. Please, it's Cassandra now, the agent replied with a smile. I'm not here in an official capacity tonight. I wanted to see the exhibition and to give you an update in person. They moved to a quieter corner of the gallery, where a bench offered respite from the crowded floor. The plea agreements have been finalized, Cassandra informed her. David accepted a deal, 15 years for wire fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft, with the possibility of parole after 10. In exchange, he's providing testimony against Elizabeth and their other accomplices. Sarah absorbed this information with a calm that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. And Elizabeth, she's fighting it, Cassandra replied. But with David's testimony and the mountain of evidence, the prosecutor is confident. She's looking at 20 to 25 years when all the charges from multiple jurisdictions are combined. Sarah nodded, feeling no joy but a certain sense of closure. And the foundation money? Almost all recovered, Cassandra confirmed. The offshore accounts have been frozen and the funds are being repatriated. The paperwork is slow, but the money is secure. That's what matters most, Sarah said. Those funds were meant to provide arts education to underserved communities, not to finance David and Elizabeth's escape. There's something else, Cassandra added. We've identified 3 more victims of Elizabeth's previous scams. They weren't as fortunate as you. They lost nearly everything before the fraud was discovered. The prosecutor wondered if you'd be willing to speak with them, perhaps help them through their recovery process. Your strength has been remarkable, Sarah. Sarah considered the request. 6 months ago, she might have wanted to put as much distance as possible between herself and anything related to the crime that had upended her life. But now, having channeled her experience into this exhibition, into something productive and healing, the idea of helping others felt right. I'd be happy to, she agreed. Perhaps they'd be interested in contributing to the next phase of this exhibition as well. We're expanding to include workshops on recovery and rebuilding. Cassandra smiled, impressed by Sarah's resilience. I'll let them know. As the agent departed to view the exhibition, Megan rejoined Sarah. Everything okay? She asked. Sarah nodded. The legal proceedings are wrapping up. Justice is being served. She glanced around the crowded gallery, at the powerful artwork and the engaged visitors. But this feels more important somehow. Turning pain into purpose, Megan observed. Exactly, Sarah agreed. David and Elizabeth tried to destroy my life, but they inadvertently gave me a new direction instead. Later that evening, as the last guest departed and the gallery staff began closing procedures, Sarah stood before the final piece in the exhibition, a powerful mixed media work she had created herself. The central image showed a house split in two, one half pristine and perfect, the other revealing hidden cameras, document shredders, and false bottoms and drawers. Layered throughout were fragments of the fraudulent documents David and Elizabeth had prepared, now rendered harmless as art materials. The FBI had permitted her to use redacted versions for the project after the evidence had been processed. At the bottom of the piece, Barely visible unless one looked closely, was a small inscription, "The truth will out." Sarah gathered her things, preparing to leave. The renovated loft she now called home awaited her, a space entirely her own, decorated with items she had chosen herself, secured with a state-of-the-art system Cassandra had recommended. Her phone chimed with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Claire from Seattle. Agent Kim gave me your contact information. I was one of Elizabeth Kaplan's victims 3 years ago. I saw the online coverage of your exhibition. If your offer to connect with other survivors is genuine, I would be grateful. Some days, I still feel like I'm drowning in the aftermath." Sarah read the message twice, then composed a reply. "Claire, thank you for reaching out. The offer is absolutely genuine. The drowning feeling does subside, I promise. Let's meet next week. In the meantime, please know you're not alone in this journey." After sending the message, Sarah put away her phone and took one last look around the gallery. 6 months ago, she had returned home to find her life shattered by betrayal and deception. Tonight, she was leaving a space she had filled with meaning and connection. It wasn't the life she had planned, but as she stepped out into the cool Chicago evening, Sarah Mitchell realized it might be something better. A life built not on blind trust, but on clear-eyed purpose and the authentic strength that comes only through surviving the unimaginable. This incredible true story reminds us that sometimes the people closest to us can hide the darkest secrets. Sarah Mitchell's journey from betrayal to empowerment shows the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered someone in your life wasn't who they claimed to be? How did you rebuild trust afterward? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay updated on more incredible true stories of deception, justice, and human resilience.